Welcome, residents, to the Dr. DC podcast. My name is producer Richard, and across from me is the Doctor himself.
Hello.
Each week, we talk about the weird and wonderful world of DC while fielding questions from listeners just like you. This week, we are joined by writer, producer, creator, Heath Corson.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
Very, very excited to have you here. This is our first DC writer.
Yeah.
No, come on. You have a DC podcast and I'm your first DC writer?
I know. A lot of DC fans, and but never a DC writer.
Well, I'll tell you something. I was a fan first, so that's how it works.
Absolutely.
That's the best kind. I mean, I can't imagine that there's too many people choosing to work in that industry who don't love it.
Though sometimes I think Grant Morrison might not actually like DC, is doing it against his will.
No, Grant. I've been very lucky to meet Grant only a handful of times, and he loves these characters. He just sees them through whatever amazing haze he sees them in. He sees them in 12 dimensions.
That's totally true.
Grant feels like he might actually be the Monitor.
Oh my God! I mean, just talking to the guy, it's unbelievable. I'll tell you a quick Grant story.
Please. Yeah.
I did a signing at San Diego when Bizarro came out.
Right.
And Grant was coming after me, so I lingered just a little bit so that I could actually meet him and shake his hand and tell him how much I loved Super Gods. I actually brought my Super Gods so that he could sign it.
God.
It was so nice, and he was like, "Of course," and he started to sign it. And then he goes, so what is it that you write? And I said, I'm actually writing the Bizarro book. And he lights up and he goes, Bizarro's a great book. It's so funny. You're doing such a great job with it.
Donkey, what a good job.
Holy crap.
That's amazing.
I freaked out. I was like, I kind of went to my room shaking, like, Grant Morrison read my book. I was really, really excited about that.
Oh my God, that's wild. Well, I mean, so normally when we start the show, we go in through some DC news and that, but that's not.
No, do the DC.
That's
news.
not nearly as.
I want to hear.
It's not nearly as interesting to me though as getting
incorrect.
Getting our listeners more familiar with you and things like that. So I do want to throw it over to you a little bit. You just said you're a fan first. You had a big fanboy moment with Grant Morrison. Where did that start? Like, were you a kid into comic books, or like when did you get into?
I was a kid into comic books. I can point to the very beginning was the little blue ribbon digests that they used to sell at the supermarket.
Oh wow! Okay,
And if you don't remember these, people, look up the DC blue ribbons, because what they would do is reprint probably about a dozen of the top stories of the year, and they would do a book called like The Best Of, and it would be like the best stories we published from 1984.
Right.
And then they put them all together in a tiny little paperback and sell them for like 99 cents. And that was my first sort of entryway, is that I was at the supermarket, and when my mom would buy them for me, and when she wouldn't, she'd just sit me in the magazine section, and I would sit and read all the digests. And what I liked about them was that it had the Legion of Superheroes. It had Sergeant Rock. It had Swamp Thing. It would have a Batman story. It would have a Superman story. And I just got exposed to all of these characters all at the same time.
Right.
And I was like, this is amazing.
Well, we've talked about it a few times, that like the thing that we like with those new like 100-page giants that are in Walmarts is at least there's something in a space that isn't already a comic book shop for people to pick up and get exposed to some of those stories. Yeah.
I would agree with that, and I think it's super interesting. And what a great way to sort of use their library as a point of entry for people who it feels a little intimidating.
Yes.
They're like, wow, 1,000 issues of Detective Comics? Like, where do I even start?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's interesting to go like, no, here's an entry point. so that was how I got into it, and I was very young, and then I just sort of got hooked. I met my very best friend in grade school, middle school, and high school because I had moved from St. Louis to Chicago, and it was the day before I started school, and we were both in the waiting room for the doctor reading Hulk comics.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, hey, you're reading the Hulk. And he's like, you're reading the Hulk. And we started talking about superheroes. And I was like, ooh, did we just become best friends? and we did. We became best friends. And we would talk about comic books all day long and draw comics and play Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. And then he's still one of my very dear friends. So
now,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it sounds like especially from those blue ribbon things, such like a broad sort of entry point. Do you have like a favorite superhero or a favorite book, when you did start picking up, like floppies and things like that? Is there a character that sort of like rose to the top of all of those different things you were reading?
I was always a Batman guy,
right,
because of the villains. And when I got in, it was Len Wein was writing. There was sure. Marshall Rogers. There were it was just an amazing time to be a Batman fan.
Right.
And so I was deep into the Batman stuff. But I will tell you, one of my favorite DC stories that sort of hooked me was one of the trades I got was the Seven Soldiers of Victory story.
Oh, okay.
And it was the team up between the Justice League, the Justice Society, and they had to go back in time to rescue the Seven Soldiers of Victory.
That's right, yeah.
And I got a chance to I used to do a podcast with Len Wein for Nerdist and Ben Blacker called the Nerdist Comics Panel.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that. Oh, it's a great podcast.
And so I got a chance to sort of become friends with Len, who was a huge influence on me and my storytelling. And I got to tell him that. And I said, Len, how did you figure out? Because what I liked, I think, as a kid most about that was there were so many superheroes in it.
Yes,
there were so many characters. And I said, Len, how did you figure out who was going to team up with who? And he said, I did it by color. In the end,
that's amazing.
It was so many people that I just teamed them up by color, and I was like, "That's amazing."
Well, yeah, I mean, between those three teams, and especially with the Seven Soldiers, there's some like less used characters, right? Like the Star Spangled Kid or Shining Knight or stuff like that, right? Yeah, holy cow, that's amazing. All right, so it does sound like you sort of, even though you were reading Hulk comics and stuff like that, it does sound like you kind of grew up like a DC sort of guy.
To be really fair, I did absolutely read both.
Sure.
You go through a moment where you're like, oh, Spider-Man's the only guy because you're a teenager and he's a teenager. And you're like, that's my guy. And then as you sort of get angrier, I think you're like, Batman's the way to do it.
Yeah.
You go through your Wolverine and Punisher, and then you're like, no, Batman's got it right.
Yeah.
You scare these people. And I remember, I was a kid reading Watchmen in real time.
Oh, God.
Going to the store and getting a Watchmen comic, and when it ended, I had to go to summer camp.
Oh, Jesus.
So I made my dad go to the comic book store and send me the last 2 issues of Watchmen when I was at camp.
Wow.
Because I couldn't miss it. And my dad flipped through it and it was like, what the hell is this book?
Well, yeah, especially those last 2 issues.
You, Dad. This is really complicated stuff.
You wouldn't get it.
You wouldn't get it.
Those last 2 issues too are crazy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, if just to flip through those ones.
So yeah, I would say I was always equally. I loved both of them for completely different times and completely different reasons. But I don't think I ever fell out of love with any of them. But I think Batman has always been my favorite.
Sure. So then now how did you transition that sort of love of comic books and interest in all of these characters and that into what you do for a living? Because you like you mentioned, you wrote the Bizarro miniseries, but you have written for the cartoons like Justice League Action and stuff like that. You've written a couple of the animated films, Throne of Atlantis and Justice League War and stuff like that. Like how do you take that thing that you're so passionate about, that you like grew up loving, and actually turn it into the thing you get to work on?
It's actually that's a great question. And when I did when I first moved out here, I hooked up with a college buddy of mine, Richie Keene, and we wrote a digital series for Warner Brothers called Aim High, which was basically it's Ferris Bueller meets Jason Bourne.
Right.
So the idea is that this guy is a high school hitman for the U.S. government.
Sure, yeah.
And the tagline was "Killing is easy, high school is hard."
Yeah.
And it was called Aim High because that's what they always told us in high school was to reach for the stars, but it also means aim for the head.
Right.
And it really became this sort of a Ferris Bueller, Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility story that we sort of meshed with a John Hughes thing.
Right.
And we had a great time doing it. It was a sort of a big hit for Warner Brothers, and Mick G produced it. And we won a Writers Guild Award for it in 2012, I believe.
Wow.
2013. And so after that, they went to us and said, look, you guys could do, you can meet whoever you want over here. What do you want to do? And I said, I want to meet the people who are doing the direct DVDs, DC animated movies. And they were like, no, really, you could meet anybody. I go, no, that's who I want to meet.
Sure.
So they set up a meeting. They sent a bunch of my animation work over to Alan Burnett.
Oh my God.
And I had a meeting with Alan, and Alan, as I'm sure you guys know, are one of the architects of Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, I mean all the stuff we grew up on.
Yeah, as well as like every animated show for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
And I went into Alan and I actually pitched him a full story of Justice League International.
Wow.
The comedy version. And I said, this is what I want to do. I want to do Justice League International.
Like the Keith Giffen era.
And DeMatteis and Maguire.
Yeah.
And I said, because you guys do all this like super serious square-jawed stuff, like this is going to be really funny. And at the time I was like, I mean, think about it. It's Alec Baldwin as Maxwell Lord. It's Sofia Vergara as Fire. It's Joel McHale as Booster Gold, and like Matthew Perry as Blue Beetle.
That's God. Joel McHale as Booster Gold just blew my mind right now.
I actually really like all of that.
And Brian Posen as Nort. Like this is amazing.
Oh my God, that would be so good.
Nathan Fillion as Captain Atom. I was like, this is gonna be amazing. It's gonna be so funny. And he was like, that's a really fun idea. And he ran it up the ladder and it sort of disappeared.
Sure.
And I didn't hear from him for a while. And then I looped back around after like 6 months and I was like, hey, Alan. And Alan's very funny. He's a lovely, lovely guy. And he knew exactly what I was doing. And he emailed me back and he's like, I don't have anything for you right now.
Sure.
Like, okay, got it. So I looped back around like another 6 months. So at this point, it was a year since I met him.
Right.
And I said, hey, Alan, just wanted to check in. And he goes, you know what? I think I have something for you. I think maybe I can get you a Scooby-Doo. And I said, oh my God, that's amazing. I would love that. Let me know. And he says, okay, well, let me clear it. And let me see what's going on. And so it took about another couple days, and he wrote me, and then he called me, and he said, look, bad news, the Scooby thing's not going to work out. And I was like, okay. He goes, but I think I have something that might be better suited for you. And I was like, okay, what's that? And he said, it's the Justice League.
My God.
I was like, whoa, Justice League. And I was like, yes, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And he said, okay, well, you're going to have to put together, I'm going to send you the comics, which was the New 52,
right?
The Jeff Johns, Jim Lee New 52.
Yeah.
He said, I need you to sort of bring in what you would do with it as a movie and pitch it. And there's going to be a couple other people in the room. And I was like, okay, cool. So I go to the meeting. In the room is Alan, okay, which is already intimidating.
Sure,
enough.
of course.
Mike Carlin.
Oh, God.
Who I know like the name from, Death of Superman.
Yep.
And when he was an editor over at Marvel, when he was an editor at DC, I know who Mike Carlin is, and Jeff Johns.
That must be so surreal as someone who's, a fan of the material, even for someone who's, starting to make a name for themselves kind of in an adjacent industry. That must be a crazy meeting to walk into.
It was a crazy meeting.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, cool. What are you going to do with these characters? And look, I came in with a very strong take. Like my take was, we know what's great about this idea is that we know who these characters are.
Yes.
But none of these people know each other.
Right.
So they don't know whether to trust each other. They don't know if they like each other. They're trying to figure out, are we all on the same side? Are you sure? So what was cool was to be able to start from scratch of the dynamics and start to pair them up. Who's going to like who? Who's going to immediately trust who?
Right.
Who thinks this person is like, well, I'm not so sure about them.
Right.
And I started to sort of pull dynamics that I really liked from the comics, like Green Lantern and Batman. Really,
such a good dynamic. Yeah,
great dynamic. Superman and Wonder Woman really feeling like we are gods walking among men.
Yeah,
and Superman saying, no, I kind of feel the opposite. I don't want to be that. I just want to be a man walking among other men.
Yeah,
and that's not what Diana's saying. So that was really cool. And then it was a really fun meeting. You know, they scheduled at the time Jeff's time in like 15-minute increments.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Because so, he was doing everything. Yeah.
Yeah. We were there for 15 minutes and like his assistant knocks on the door and is like, hey, Jeff, you need to approve the designs for the next Batman game. And he's like, you know what? Give me another 15 minutes. See if you could push that.
Wow.
And he ended up staying in there for an hour and a half as we talked about like, what's the real like fun Breakfast Club relationships between these characters that we're starting to explore.
Right.
And that was a really fun thing. So they sent me off to go write the outline. And as I was writing the outline, they called me and they were like, oh, by the way, you don't have Aquaman anymore. And I was like, wait, what?
Okay, that was going to be a question I was going to ask you, was how you decided, because in the comics Aquaman is in there. In Justice League War it's Shazam. I was going to ask if that was your choice and where that came from.
I was told I couldn't have Aquaman, and they didn't tell me why until later.
Right.
And then they told me, but you can have Shazam. Why don't you put Shazam in there?
Right.
And I was like, okay. So I put Shazam in there, and then they called me and said, we're thinking that maybe we're going to take the Flash away too.
What?
And I was like, guys, you can't take the Flash. Like, I really need him because Flash was the one who wanted to be there. Like, Flash and Lantern are the two who are like, this is awesome.
Right.
I'm having a ball. And he's also the sort of brown noser to Batman, where Green Lantern is sort of the one who's like, I'm going to show this guy.
Yeah, it's an important dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let alone the fact that he's always a founding member of the Justice League.
Totally. Flash just he wants to be everywhere. He's got major FOMO. You can't do anything without the Flash showing up.
Totally.
So that totally would restructure the whole thing, because the end is basically, Diana puts the sword in Darkseid's eye, and then Arthur puts the trident in his other eye.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, so wait a minute. If I don't have Aquaman, like, I got to build a lot of this from scratch.
Yeah.
But what was great was having Billy Batson be a fan of Vic Stone.
Yes.
Really opened that relationship up. And also, don't forget, nobody knows that Billy Batson's a kid.
Right.
So they're seeing this big, guy who's as strong as Superman, who's got these powers with them, and he's acting really immature.
Sure.
And I was like, well, that's a really fun duality to get to play. And that's why one of my favorite moments is when Wonder Woman decks him and says, you are a warrior, act like it.
Yeah.
And he's like, yep, sorry, ma'am. Because I was like, yeah, that's what happens when you're a 10-year-old rolling with the big boys.
Yeah, totally.
So I thought that was really fun. And then I wrote the outline. I submitted that. They had some notes, and then I wrote the script, and the script came out really fast. Because all the moves were there. It just got to be a lot of the dialogue and dynamics,
right,
which I really enjoyed. And then there was another moment, where Batman he puts a knife up against Darkseid's throat, or Desaad's throat.
Yeah.
And this is where I was playing on these people don't know who each other are. Even the bad guys don't know who they are.
Right.
So when he puts the knife to Desaad's throat, he's like, you wouldn't dare. And we realize no one knows who Batman is. Is Batman a murderer? Is Batman a guy who doesn't do this? And he says to Desaad, wouldn't you? And Desaad knows, yeah, he would absolutely do that. And he flips out.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was a moment I was really excited and proud of, because I was like, oh, that plays on exactly what I'm doing with the new entry of these people, of being scared and worried and terrified and you know, a little shocked and impressed by who they are and what does that mean to the world. And then immediately after I was done, they were like, do you want to do another one? And I was like, yeah. So they gave me Batman Assault on Arkham. And as soon as that was done, they said, do you want to do another one? And they gave me Throne of Atlantis.
That's
and
wild.
I was like, yeah. And then after that, I did 2 Batman Unlimiteds.
That's
and
right.
then I did a Tom and Jerry, and I did a couple Scooby-Doos. And then after that, I went right into Justice League Action, where I wrote, I think, a dozen of those.
Yeah. Wow. Now in Justice League Action, I'm pretty sure it's you that wrote an episode that's called Boo-Ray for Bizarro.
Yes.
That's you. So did you always have some love for Bizarro? Because that's also the comic miniseries that you wrote for DC.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So this after I wrote Throne of Atlantis, we were promoting it at New York Comic-Con. And I had been trying to write comics for a really long time, just because I was like, and I was the guy who was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to write a comic. Like, no way. Sure. Like, really important people get to write comics. And then as I met more and more people, I was like, oh, wait, maybe it's not really important people who get to write comics. Maybe anybody get to write comics. So then I said, I went to the DC booth in New York Comic Con, and they actually had Throne of Atlantis, the trailer running. And I turned to an editor and I said, hey, that's me. I wrote this. You're running this at your booth. Is there any way you could I could pitch for comic books? And he was like, well, I don't know. What do you have? And I had worked up a couple of pitches. And that's the thing about pitching in comic books, for me at least, that my experience, they don't tell you what they're doing.
Right.
So you just sort of have to pitch stuff that you go, well, I don't know if you're doing anything with this character, if you're doing anything with this character. And I ran through a bunch of things, and the guy was not impressed in the least. The first idea I came up with was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with Jimmy Olsen and Bizarro.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Yes, yeah.
I was like, because that's going to be hilarious.
That is so funny.
Yeah, I was like, it's just, and it allows us to do whatever we want. They're going to go through the entire DCU. We can have them stop everywhere, and just have like random fun experiences. Because my take on Bizarro was always I like the opposite creature. I never liked the sad Frankenstein who really couldn't get it, couldn't get it right. I really liked the sort of like joyous creature who had his own planet, who was desperately trying to do stuff, and always wanted to make things right and have everybody like him.
But where are the chupacabras?
Yeah.
So my Bizarro just wanted to make everybody like him, because I thought this is the ultimate outsider. Literally, he is the opposite of everybody. No one understands him.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really funny place to start. So I pitched him that, and he goes, that one. And I was like, okay. So I wrote it up, and
so
history
good.
got made. So that was a crazy fun series to do. And Alan Burnett, who was running Justice League Action with Jim Krieg, were fans of that, and said, why don't you just do a Bizarro one? And I was like, great.
So fucking cool.
I got to basically do Bizarro the way I wanted to do Bizarro in Justice League Action as well.
That's amazing.
Incredibly fun.
Now, did you, since that's the version of Bizarro that you kind of take to, did you read, I think it's Greg Pak's Action Comics 40 in the New 52? Because that's a really great, like, Bizarro world kind of one shot.
I read that. I read Grant's Bizarro World. I read, I think Jeff Johns did a Bizarro World. I did like some of the old like 1950 ones where he had his own planet.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I'll tell you guys this other story that was ridiculous, because you said, do you have some sort of connection to this character?
Yeah.
And I said, well, when I was a kid, I dressed up as Superman, and I was like 8 years old, and I didn't have a Superman outfit. I literally put on a blue shirt and blue tights and like red underwear and like the red cape, and I put the S on in masking tape.
Right.
And I had my mom take pictures of me posing in our apartment.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
I also like drew a bad guy with X's in his eyes, and I hung him from a piece of string. So I had a picture of me like hitting him.
Got to create the narrative. I like it.
So I had my mom send me. I said, "Hey, dig up those pictures and send them to me." So I get them, and I open the pictures that she'd scanned, and I gasp because I had put the S on in the mirror. And it was
so it's backwards. Oh, so you were Bizarro.
Oh my God.
So I sent this to my editor, and I said, "Hey guys, just for the record, me am not Superman. Me am Bizarro."
That's amazing.
Oh, that's incredible.
Oh.
But you know what? That's
For these years, I thought I was Superman.
But
Turns out I was actually Bizarro.
But that's such like a beautiful thing, because that's also Bizarro. He just thinks he's Superman.
Exactly.
And so that became a moment that I put into the book, is that he puts the S on in
the mirror. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And so he goes, "I'm Superman." Because every time he looks at himself, he goes,
That's
"I'm Superman."
so good.
Oh, that's it's such a beautiful moment, actually.
That's amazing.
Holy cow, that's incredible.
And then also we added the joke where he puts it on. He finger paints the S in them, and then he looks at himself and he goes, "Me will become a bat."
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a good one.
So I realized, me am Bizarro. So that became my deep love for this character.
That's
Now,
wonderful.
just one last question before we sort of move into like the next sort of segment that we've got. Since you love Bizarro and you kind of love that world and you love that sort of fun, kind of inverted, not necessarily sad versions of those characters, would you ever, or do you have like a pitch that you might occasionally try for like an actual like Earth 29 kind of, like where we see the other Bizarros, like Yellow Lantern or like the Ceramian Snitch?
That was gonna be the second part of the series.
Oh my God!
They spend the first 6 issues going through America, and then the second 6 issues, because throughout the series, you see there's a lot of Bizarro go home.
Yes.
So there's all this like Bizarro go home, Bizarro come home. Well, the reveal at the end of 6 was supposed to be, we've been asking you to go home for 6 issues. We need you. You're our greatest hero. You're our worstest hero.
Yeah.
So the second 6 issues were going to be Jimmy and Bizarro on a road trip in Bizarro.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah, so we sort of continue the road trip, only now we're in Bizarro World, and we get to do all the Bizarro World jokes. And you see, like, he really is their worstest hero. They went to share him with the universe. That's why they rocketed him out, to share him, because they thought, we can't keep him. We have to share him with the universe.
That's such a great idea. I love that so much. Like there's a big part of me as a fan of DC. A thing that I really always loved about DC was like the multiverse thing, that there are just like these other versions, other like realms in that. And definitely, bringing it back to Grant too, like reading the Multiversity and like getting into the Multiversity guidebook and then being like, oh, there it is. There's Bizarro World. There's Earth 29. And like,
Bizarro World.
You see all of these things, and he's pulling from Silver Age and from all through like the sort of broad spectrum of the history of DC. And there's a part of me that wishes that there were more alternate Earth stories. Like I love that we're getting Freedom Fighters right now. Yeah. And I love that, in the New 52, we had that Earth 2 and then through like World's End and Earth 2 Society. I wish there were more of those stories.
Yeah, I'm sure you remember that when they used to do the Elseworlds, and they used to have those versions that were really interesting, and that's how we got Gotham by Gaslight and Red Sun, and The Nail was a version, and I think that was Alan Davis who did The Nail.
Yeah.
So we got some great stories. And also what I love about that is it gives you the freedom to bend but not break those characters.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it gives the audience the ability to go, oh, I'm going on a fun journey, but the stuff I love is still going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know? So they feel protected, like you're not taking away everything I love and breaking it and changing the status quo. You're just exploring a different version.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that stuff is always really fun.
That's amazing.
That's perfectly said. And I think that leads us perfectly into the theme of this week, which is adaptations. So obviously we're talking Charlie Kaufman, we're talking Nicolas Cage, we're adaptations, everyone's favorite movie, from the
yeah, it's everyone's favorite movie. You're right.
You don't know, Spike Jonze directed.
You're so proud of yourself.
I was really proud of myself. I may or may not have researched who is the director of that. No, it's definitely not. But no, we're talking about adaptations of DC this week. We're talking about, Gotham Gaslight is a great example of that. But
well, yeah, and I mean, even just what we were just talking about too. The three of those kind of big, direct to DVD things that you worked on are adaptations, right? Justice League War adapts Justice League Origin, that first arc from the New 52 Justice League. Throne of Atlantis is obviously an adaptation of Throne of Atlantis, and even Assault on Arkham, right? Is that's an adaptation from based in the world of the video games, but
that's right.
Yes. but based on the Suicide Squad and these characters and things like that. So
right, an original story in the world of Arkham.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what is it like when you go in to do an adaptation of something that's already a pre-existing property? Like, what is your mindset when you're walking into that, and how do you want to obviously bring in something of your own, but also giving homage to the original works?
That's a really good question, because you're right. You want to do both. The first thing that you want to do is say, or for me, is to sort of deep dive and say, what am I bringing to this story, and what isn't working as well or won't work in the medium that we're adapting it to.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that James Tucker, who is the producer on all the animated movies, is very good about doing is saying, we want you to have a different experience watching the animated movies than just reading the comic book.
Sure.
Because otherwise you would just read the comic book. If it was going to be exactly the same except it was moving and had voices, that's not all that interesting.
Sure.
So what's going to be the different experience that we're going to be able to give you? And I took that to heart. I thought that was a really interesting way to look at things. So I think the first thing you go is, what am I good at? What am I going to bring to this experience? For me, for Justice League War, as we mentioned, it was the dynamics. It was the reset of these characters, and what's the take of each of them, and how do we reestablish who likes who's going to be friends, who's not going to be friends, who's distrustful of these people. And that's a really cool element. And then after that, it sort of became great. And now what are we going to cherry pick from the story in order to play into those strengths?
Right.
For Assault on Arkham, it was a little bit different, and it was different in what I thought was a really fun way, because when you play those Arkham games, you are Batman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to be able to mess at all with that experience. There is nothing better than being Batman.
Yeah.
So my pitch for that was, okay, so let's say you're Batman. You swing in, you beat the shit out of all these guys, and then you swing away. And the camera follows Batman disappearing over the city, and then pans back to the guys he just beat up.
Right.
And we follow them.
Right.
And I was like, what if there's a Batman story happening in the background, and that's what the player is doing. But here's the story that you're not seeing. That's the other side. So it became this sort of sleight of hand trick where we had Batman in that story, but really it's a Suicide Squad story with Batman.
Well, yeah, and Batman is he's almost got a boogeyman quality in that movie, right? He's,
right.
Like just the idea that they're breaking into Arkham is already kind of daunting, right? Because of Arkham's reputation. But then like the specter of whether or not Batman is going to show up, is Batman going to catch them? Like he kind of hangs over them through that movie.
And then that really opened it all up because I was never going to be able to compete with the experience of playing the game.
Right.
So I said, great. What if this was the story that was going on in the background that you never saw?
Right.
So in that case, there's all these guys, there's all these villains. And now I knew, okay, well, I wanted to write the dynamics, but also the great thing about villains is they have no impulse control, and they're all working on their different agenda.
Yes.
So where in Justice League, everybody's on the same side, basically.
Right.
None of these guys are on the same side.
Right.
And that's amazing fun. So now when do they start backstabbing each other? When do they start betraying each other? When is the goal revealed that, oh, what I sent you in there for is not what I sent you in there for at all.
Right, because Waller's also out for her own thing too. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that became really complicated and really fun. And basically the take was, which the director Jay Olivia really liked, was this is a Guy Ritchie heist movie.
Yes.
With bad guys.
Well, and it's got that kind of Guy Ritchie, like the character introductions feel very much like that sort of like Lock, Stock sort of it has that kind of pacing and everything.
Yeah, Jay bit down real hard on that in a really fun way. But I will say the trick, the sleight of hand is we show you a guy bathing in blood in the beginning, and spoiler alert, by the end you're actually a little sad that he dies.
Wow.
Yeah, that's true.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, well, yeah, and it's played so well too. And you know, the thing with the Suicide Squad is like who won't make it out, and
right.
And I wasn't able to call it when I watched Assault on Arkham, which I think is something, because there's, I don't know, you do kind of play that game. It's the Suicide Squad, so you're like, okay, well, like one of these people isn't gonna make it.
Is it the man who can climb anything? Yeah.
Right. I will say it was a bummer. We wanted to do. I was a big fan of the Ostrander Suicide Squad, like for a really long time. That was one of my favorite comics. So I really wanted Black Spider to be Bronze Tiger.
Sure,
but
yeah.
It wasn't going to work because the way he was designed.
Right.
So because we couldn't do the reveal if it wasn't a full face.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
That's awesome. Hey, residents. I want to take this opportunity to do a huge shout out to the Brain Freeze Podcast Network. If you go to brainfreezepodcast.com, you can learn more about the amazingly fun and diverse podcasts on this network. Obviously, you'll find the Dr. DC podcast, but have you listened to The Goods from the Woods yet? Each episode dives into a unique cultural phenomenon from cryptozoology to Elvis. Each week provides a hilarious history dive into some of the strange happenings across the world. Or how about the Headbangers with Holmes podcast? Did you listen to emo, hardcore, pop punk, maybe screamo, or one of the other million punk and metal subgenres in the early 2000s? Then you'll love Headbangers. Each week, they interview a different touchstone of the music back then, and along the way, learn about what it's like to grow up playing music. How about the newest podcast on Brain Freeze, The Deli Boys? It's hosted by the beloved comedy writers Evan Susser and David Phillips, who set off to do something never before done. Rank 14 Jewish delis. How would you like to hear three amazing comedians talk about the things they hate most in life? Well, then you need to check out the Hate Locker podcast. Every other week, the hosts of the Hate Locker argue whose hate is more poignant by discussing the things that bug them most, usually joined by a hilarious comedian guest. If you're talking about brain freeze, then you have to mention the Squeezebox podcast. Going for over a decade now, these two best friends talk about their lives, jobs, society, and often a lot of dick jokes and wordplay. Usually about dick jokes. No matter what you like, Brain Freeze has something you will probably enjoy. So go to brainfreezepodcast.com to learn more, or go to whichever podcast provider you use and look for one of these great podcasts. All right, back to the show. So we got a ton of questions this week, so I'd love to dive into those, and I'm very curious to see what your opinion on some of these are.
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of stupid songs and drops that we're gonna do for each of our segments. So
this is where you find out what you signed up for.
yeah, this is where we make ourselves look really stupid. So let's head on. Let's head on over to Twitter.
Twitter.
You okay?
I kind of tripped over it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I may be embarrassed by that drop.
Well, wait for the next one, because the first question comes from Stump Chunkman.
Step into the stump. Stump Chunkman. Man.
That's right. So the question from Stump Chunkman is, do you prefer the stories to be a one-to-one to the comics, like Flashpoint or Flashpoint Paradox, Dark Knight Returns, etc., or to be more loosely based on a comic book story?
Right. So, I mean, in both of those cases, obviously there's slight differences in the animated films to the comics, but they are relatively faithful adaptations. I mean, we just talked a little bit about like what an approach is, to adaptation, but what's your preference? Do you like being like hewing very closely, or do you prefer something more like, like Justice League Doom takes Tower of Babel, but really like only just the idea that Batman's plans get stolen?
Right. For me, I prefer, that's a really fun, I would say both as a writer. I was about to split it up and say as a writer and as a fan, but I think they're both the same thing. Sure. I have to say,
That's good.
I love being surprised.
Right.
I want to write surprise. I want the twists and turns to surprise you. I don't want you to know you're a little off the rails from the story you've already read.
Right.
And maybe we'll grab and throw the big moments up there. But I want you to also go like, wait, that wasn't in the book. Like, whoa, oh, this is cool. This is a cool take on it.
Right.
I'm so glad you mentioned Doom by the late, great Dwayne McDuffie, which is one of my all-time favorites. I'm also it shouldn't surprise you, I'm a big Legion of Doom fan. And so, talk about a whole bunch of villains who somehow managed to work together.
Yeah.
I have no clue how you have run a meeting with those guys all day. Especially with my boy Bizarro in the group. Like, you sort of get the feeling that he's the one who always brings cream cheese every week. There's no bagels. It's like, but me, I'm brought cream cheese. Bizarro, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing.
Coffee with no cups. Yeah.
Oh, he just brings the creamer. He brings creamer and cups.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, and nobody but Cheetah is happy. Who just licks it right out of the cup.
I just want to see like a book that's just that meeting. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also a huge...
Brainiac is basically the secretary. And
well, of course, yeah.
He's like, can we just get back on track, team?
I mean, speaking of Legion of Doom and kind of adaptation, I actually think that Robot Chicken does like a pretty great take on that like dysfunction. Like their Legion of Doom is hilariously dysfunctional. Yes. The way they play off each other. Like there's some really, really great takes in there, I think. Yeah, I mean, I brought up Justice League Doom because I know how different it is from Tower of Babel. I also love that movie. That's one that I can probably put on more than almost anything else. It's because it's such a simple premise, and I like seeing some of these characters you don't see necessarily all that often, like Ma'alafa and things like that in there. I don't know. I'm hard. I don't know that I can answer this question because I really like Dark Knight Returns, which is super, super faithful to the book. But
I think it really depends on the story and how it's done. I think that it's story to story.
I think it might be about like what's the most important part of it, right? Is for Dark Knight Returns, it's so much about where that character is in that moment, right? So then for that, like maybe you do just follow that story because it's all of those beats, all that history that like Frank Miller puts in there is what gets the character to where he is.
Right.
Whereas the thing with Tower of Babel is like, what's the most interesting part of it? It's like, it's the premise. It's that Batman has plans, they get stolen. Maybe the exact steps of that aren't as important.
Well, I think it also depends on how precious that story is, right? Because you take something like the Killing Joke and you have different expectations of how literal it's going to be with the story.
Yeah, that's true too, I guess. Yeah.
I think that's true. And I also think, the Dark Knight Returns is a really good example because I don't want anybody messing with the Dark Knight Returns.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
I do want to see a faithful movie version of that. And I am looking for every beat to be up there and every word to be up there.
Right.
And I think maybe the photo negative side of that is Zack Snyder's Watchmen, which we got almost a pretty faithful version of Watchmen.
Yeah.
And yet you were like, I don't know that I'm so totally satisfied with this. Like there's something, it feels like you're missing nuance. And it feels like you needed more than what was just on the page. And yet Zack Snyder pretty faithfully gave you what was on the page.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably as close an adaptation of that story that you could get, like switching mediums and stuff like that too, right? Because there's so much in Watchmen that's like that you have to read. Like there's documents and there's the Black Sail like comic in there and stuff like that.
Right.
But that's interesting. That's a tough question.
But I also think that it can come down to like if you look at movies, is it a film or is it a movie? Like when you're talking about reboots, like if someone wanted to reboot or remake Bad Boys, like a Michael Bay film or something like that, I don't think that you would care that much. But if you take something like 2001 or like The Shining,
Casablanca,
something that's film, I think people are a lot more precious on it and are more worried about how you
like just how it's held in sort of the popular regard.
So I think
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
please go on.
I was going to say, I think when you adapt something, anything, there's things that you have to stay true to, and then there's some stuff that I think you can play a little fast and loose with. And I'm thinking of the Michael Bay Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That's right. Yeah,
them all aliens, and you're like, well, wait a minute, dude. Like, I'm all for them being like having different adventures and having a different reboot of it, but it's in the name. They're Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
You don't really need to add. You don't need to gild that.
They don't need another level to weirdness.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And now they're angels.
This is the Legion version of that.
Yeah.
Well, I think you guys are gonna like the next question.
Okay.
The next question comes from Razma Berries Reviews. You didn't want to keep going? No, that's okay.
Sorry, I got
so Razma Berries Reviews asks, which comic book would you love to see get either a film adaptation or an animation adaptation? He says he personally would love to see The Blackest Night get an adaptation one day, which that would be tough. Yeah. Which adaptation do you feel has been done the best so far? So first, what would you like to get done, and what do you think is done the best so far? I think The Blackest Night is tough. I mean, that would have to be an animated.
I mean, I know, Richard, you really love Superman for All Seasons. Would you want to see that get adapted?
I would love to see that be adapted as a movie. I don't think I need to see that as an animated property.
Oh, you want them to like take it all the way to the silver screen?
Yeah. I think that would make a great one. I think that would deal with the issue I have a lot with Superman, that I find that it's too much like big aliens coming from everyone and it's not grounded enough. I would love to see something that's a little bit. I think that's the best type of Superman story, is a grounded Superman story. But yeah.
How about you, Heath? Is there a particular story that's kind of on your like adaptation bucket list?
Oh, yeah, I will tell you, I repitch Justice League International pretty much every couple of years.
Sure.
Like, I so want to be able to do that.
I mean, they've got to go for it eventually, right?
I don't know idea. I even pitched it as a series, like Super Buddies.
Ooh, that would work.
Yeah, like the idea was basically like it's the league that you're in basically before you've made it or after you've made it. So that's the joke. Is like they're sort of like Justice League minors.
Yeah.
You know, where it's the young people who don't know enough and they haven't made it into the league, and sort of the old timers who are a little over the hill.
Sure.
And that was my take on Super Buddies. That's always something I want to do. I would say on things I want to see in animation, I would love to see a Long Halloween.
Yeah.
With the Tim Sale art.
Oh, right. They have to have that art
because they are doing it, right?
I think they are. My concern is that they're not doing it.
I don't know what the animation style will be, but yeah.
And in live action, the thing that I would love to see is a Kingdom Come.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
I think that would be real cool. I'm a big fan of that book, and I think that's a lot of like we were talking about Elseworlds. Like, it's a really neat way to look at those characters and glean some new stuff. So,
definitely.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite one so far?
Of the movies?
Of ones that have been done.
Adapted.
I have to say, you mentioned Justice League Doom, which I'm a huge fan of.
Absolutely.
That was one of my favorite ones. I loved the Wonder Woman one too.
Yeah.
I thought that Wonder Woman one was spectacular. And I'm a big fan of the Flashpoint, of Jim Craig's Flashpoint.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
I just love that. Yeah, the Kingdom Come. Oh, that would be good.
Let's see. I think I would. I'd like to see something Sandman.
Oh,
yeah.
But if there was a way in animation to make it look either kind of like Jay Lee's art, or on the flip side, like Juan Ferreira.
That's tough.
Like one or the other, which I know neither of them worked on Sandman.
Yeah.
But like that there's something about either of those art styles where there's something like Jay Lee's, they look like oil paintings. And,
yeah, that'd be tough.
Yeah. I think maybe something like Sandman-y.
Well, I love when they take like different types of art styles and incorporate them into them. Like I loved the Batman Ninja recent one where they halfway through they just moved towards that Japanese style of artwork and then switched back. Oh, it was great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, favorite ones that are already out there. The Dark Knight Returns one, I really love. I think Peter Weller is such like a perfect Batman in that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought they did a really nice job with those too.
I really dug that. Yeah. Oh my God. The other one that I mean, Blackest Night, as was in the question, would be amazing. But I think the other one that I'd like to see that, I'm kind of hoping is in this Reign of the Supermen thing is like something to set up like Emerald Twilight. I don't think it is in there, but like something, Green Lantern-y, I would be. You know me. I want. You want Green Lantern Earth 1?
Yeah, I mean Earth 1. That Earth 1 story is so good and so grounded. You could do something that's like almost alien-esque, but then at some point, suddenly like this juxtaposing of like bringing it to this like bigger like universe of aliens. I think that it would be so good. Is there any Doctor? I know that you are such an Aquaman fan. Is there an Aquaman story you wish that they had adapted? We're in the age of Aquaman right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's #1 DC movie right now. So
I don't know that it's a thing anyone would go for, but I'd be interested in like Time and Tide. That was like that sort of short Peter David thing that led into his 90s run. So it's pre-Hook Hand, but it was like the reintroduction of Aquaman. It's where he was like raised by dolphins and he has this like time in the Arctic and this sort of rival named Koryak and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. There's something cool about that Time and Tide series. That's some of like the earliest Aquaman stuff that I read, so it always stuck with me. But I don't know that that's necessarily the best choice to adapt, but I'd be interested.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's go to the next question then, which comes from Mallory Vanier. We don't have a song for her, unfortunately.
No drops.
No, not yet. Mallory asks, are DC animated shows more often adaptations of comic arcs, or are they more so separate stories? Do events, plot lines from animated series ever influence future comic arcs or other DC shows?
So, as someone that worked on Justice League Action, I mean, we know from the earlier, like the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, a lot of those stories have some sort of inspiration from comics, like the Thanagarian invasion, or even like Alan Moore's For the Man That Has Everything.
Right.
But when you were working on Justice League Action, is it just about, is this a good story? If you adapt it, that's great. And if not, that's great. Or is there some sort of like push from producers to try to specifically work on things?
There was no, I mean, the good thing about working in the animated world is it's pretty siloed. All these different divisions, as far as I know, are pretty siloed.
Right.
So they're not coming down and saying like, hey, this is the year of Aquaman. Let's make sure we do an Aquaman thing. Like there's really not any of that. Now, the flip side of that is all the writers and all the producers, we're all fans ourselves.
Sure.
So if there was something that we knew we would pull from, for instance, the whole 4-part beginning of Justice League Action was pulled from the 3 demons. And that was Alan Burnett's favorite Justice League comic book ever.
Oh, interesting.
So he was like, is there a way to do these 3 demons? And so we sort of said, oh, that's a really fun story. What can we use these from? What can we do with each of these demon brothers having different powers?
Right.
So that came from there. I know that Under the Red Sun, one of them came from basically the one that I rewrote from Shannon Denton, I think was the writer who wrote it, and then I did a pass on it, and it was called Under the Red Sun, and it was Superman being hunted by I forgot who the bad guy was. It is, I don't remember.
Right.
But he's being hunted on a planet with a red sun, so he loses his powers.
Right.
And that came from a comic book story. And then one of mine came from the old Superman Red, Superman Blue stories.
Right. Yeah, that's right. There is a Superman Red and Blue.
Superman Red and Superman Blue. And I was like, what can we do with this? Like, maybe all the reds are bad and all the blues are good, and we split the characters.
Right.
And so that became a really fun. And then Boo-Ray for Bizarro came out of my own comic book series.
Sure, yeah.
So, you know, I think because we're all fans and we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us,
right.
There is a certain like tipping our hat to some of those classic stories just as a jumping off point.
Right. Well, yeah. And I mean, even, you know, in a series like Young Justice, like I think it's the first season, there's an episode where Wally has to run a heart cross country. That's straight out of Wally West Flash, you know, comics, you know, that there is a certain amount in there. The Alan Moore one always sticks in my head because I remember seeing some sort of interview where he said that basically the only adaptation of his work he's ever approved of was that episode of the Justice League cartoon where they did For the Man Who Has Everything.
That's amazing. Oh, Steppenwolf. That's who he's fighting in that.
Oh,
in that
yes.
episode.
Yeah.
Okay,
good.
Yeah, no, that's a great episode.
Yeah, I mean,
that was a great episode.
As far as animated things inspiring the comics, I mean, Richard, you and I have talked about this before, but like, you know, Heart of Ice. Well, Harley Quinn, obviously, just as a character, comes from the animated series and then moved to the comics.
But that Mr. Freeze,
Heart of Ice, his origin wasn't that before that.
That's what really creates that
episode.
character, in my opinion. That really makes that a character that you want to see more.
That's right.
Yeah, it was a total reinvention. Before, he was just a guy with a cold gun that had to be kept cold. But he finally got like a motivation and you had some sort of sympathy for him and things like that.
Hey, chill.
Yes, beautifully
and
played.
I think on some level, the design from Batman the Animated Series, the Penguin, was very inspired from the Tim Burton Batman
Totally.
Returns.
Without a doubt. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. He's much less of like a monocle guy and a bit more of a monster. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you, Richard? Do you have any like particular things that stand out that you like that you've isolated as like, oh no, like I know that's a comic book story or anything like that?
I don't know, not anything particularly. I think that they've done a really good job recently of kind of mixing the two and pulling from TV and the animated series as well.
Everything does seem to have some sort of influence on each other. Like in the Flash TV show, he's been throwing lightning for several seasons. Yeah. In Flash comics, only like an issue or two ago, he
actually did that.
He like learns that he can use the Speed Force just to use lightning. Like that's a comic that came out.
That's true. Wow. Yeah.
Like 2 months ago.
That's totally true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's head on to the next question, which comes from Raging G.
All right.
It's not Temperate G yet, but
he's so upset.
He's very upset. Raging G asks, I heard the opinion that The Killing Joke was adapted too faithfully. Not the Batgirl stuff, but when it comes to dialogue and direction, but without understanding the reason behind it, making it look shallow. Do you agree? Also, was the Batman the Animated Series voice actors use the proper choice? I mean, which I would say always.
Yeah.
I'm definitely.
I mean, we've kind of talked about this a little bit about, you know, like when about the idea of adapting something but still offering something new to it.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in the second half of this one particularly. Do you Heath? Do you think that having such iconic voices like Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill step into what is largely an Elseworldsy story, does that alter the context of it? Does that change expectations?
I think it was cool. I mean, for me as a fan, I thought it was really fun to have these guys sort of say, this is the sum of this relationship of these characters that we've been exploring for what now, 25 some odd years.
Yeah.
For me, that was a really cool, fun thing.
Definitely.
And I think it's one of the most unhinged versions of the Joker. So to hear Mark get to do it is pretty much a tour de force.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, for me, those are the voices I still hear in my head when I read comics and things like that too. You know,
Yeah,
they're so ingrained because they've survived so many iterations. So to me, yeah, that didn't alter anything. I think the big thing for me in that movie was the inclusion of all of that sort of Batgirl stuff, right? Which is partly, I think, maybe to get the film to a certain length or things like that. But also maybe to try to explore the character a bit more, because the big criticism of Killing Joke is that Barbara's a prop.
Yeah.
And not a character. Now were you sort of like, do you know like the people that worked on that? Do you know what that process was like for them, taking something that's like so sort of beloved and trying to work on it?
I don't. I mean, I know who worked on it. I know it was Alan and Brian Azzarello who did the script. But I don't know the process that they went through. But it's I know that it's a really well-loved story. I think I question whether it remained relevant in this day and age.
Right.
And for me, the disconnect was, at the time, Brendan Fletcher was doing Batgirl, and they had worked really, and Babs Tarr and Cameron, and they had worked, Cameron Stewart, and they'd worked really hard at making this an upstanding character that people were looking up to, and all of a sudden like had this new look and this new feel and this new energy, and then to do this story that made her a victim and victimized her, I felt like the wrong time for that story for me.
Yeah.
But you know, that's one man's opinion. I'm still a big fan of the comic book, but I don't know if it holds up 100%. It feels like a really ugly, dark story for a really ugly, dark time.
Right.
And it was hard to revisit that world.
Yeah. I mean, to me, Killing Joke feels like these are not the words that I want to use, but it's the best I've got. It feels almost like a museum piece. Like you need to read it because it's important in the context of what came after. And obviously it, leads into Oracle and all of these kind of things like that. I mean, that wasn't the intention at the time, but Oracle comes out of that. So it's important to read it and to see like why it was such a big thing. But yeah, I think I'm tempted to agree that I don't know that it's a story that needs contemporary telling.
Yeah, a museum piece is a great way to put it. Like, I think you watch the 60s Adam West Batman, you read Killing Joke, and then you're into the Tom King sort of modern retelling, modernization of who is this guy and who are the people behind these masks.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's so radically different from what that story is. So I think museum piece is actually a great way to put it.
Oh, well. Thank you.
That's awesome. All right, well, let's move on. We're heading over to Facebook now.
Go to the Facebook. Go to the Facebook.
That's right. And the question we have on there is from Adam Upper, who asks, how awesome would a Green Lantern, Green Arrow team up adaptation be?
Oh, like the Hard Traveling Heroes thing?
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great.
That would be cool. I mean, and
70s style, dude, like the Neil Adams. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And what a opposite to what we were just talking about. If we were just talking about The Killing Joke is maybe a story out of its time, is there a better time than now to bring back something that's focused on, like quotidian issues, social justice, like all of those kind of things that were such core elements of Green Lantern, Green Arrow. Yeah. Yeah, that would be amazing. Holy cow.
That's just a great question. Yeah.
I don't think there's much to add to that
except for well done. Yeah, good job, Adam. All right, well let's go on to emails now.
Sure. Check the email.
I hope it's from a female.
We're staunch Homestar Runner supporters.
Yeah, that's true.
Sure.
Absolutely. So apparently we have a celebrity email question.
Did someone give us a fake name again?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like this has to be the real person, which is from Jason Momoa.
Oh, wow.
It must be, right?
I didn't know that he listened.
Oh, good. Yeah. Jason wrote in.
Yeah, no, exactly. Jason asks, now that I've made Aquaman not a joke character, which character now would you think will get a never gonna happen in terms of getting a movie? So
who's next on the list? If Aquaman was it never gonna happen,
and Aquaman's clearly is the number one DC movie of all time, who's next? Who are they gonna go? Well, I didn't think.
I mean, I've always thought Martian Manhunter is the never gonna happen. It's too complicated. Not enough people know him. Like I just as someone that reads the comics, I love him. I think he's great, but it's never gonna happen.
Ooh.
Yeah. How about you, Heath?
I'm gonna say, it's all gotten so blown open. Normally, I would say like no one's gonna touch Plastic Man,
right?
But these days, like, why not? You got sort of a fun Shazam movie coming out. You put someone fun in that role.
I think
and all of a sudden, like, all right,
I think
maybe
Ben Schwartz online has been campaigning to be a Plastic Man.
Ben Schwartz is a great call.
I totally think so. I love that casting.
Yeah.
John Rafio as Plastic Man makes me laugh a lot.
I think in the same vein that like we got Guardians of the Galaxy, which was characters that were unknown, obviously were not part of the zeitgeist in any sort of way. I would love. I mean, you know what I'm gonna say. Booster Gold. I want to see Booster. I want to see a Booster Gold and Blue Beetle story. I think that team up would be so good. There's so many ways to do it. I think that would be. I mean, you got time travel as a possibility in there. You got future. You got past. I mean, there's so many things. And then if you include Blue Beetle, then you have this sort of like Egypt adaptation.
Well,
that you can bring in there.
And it's buddy cops basically.
Exactly. And when does buddy cop not work? It always works. You can make that a big story, a small story. I don't know. Sure. I'm always a Blue Beetle and Booster Gold proponent for sure.
I think maybe Hawkman has moved into the they're never gonna do that.
Yeah, that could totally. Yeah, without a doubt.
That's because there's a lot you could do there too. But again, that's one that's maybe doesn't have like the wide sort of popular awareness.
Right.
Now I've got to throw one out for my dad, but also because you mentioned these characters off the top, Heath, and my dad will love this. My dad grew up on Legion of Superheroes, and Legion of Superheroes might also count as a never gonna happen sort of thing.
Oh, I'll go one more for your dad.
Sure.
I've been pitching a Legion of Substitute Hero book. Like, all I want to do is like the Legion of. I want to do all the weird guys. Like that's my niche. I just want to do a Legion of Substitute Heroes.
I will be first in line for that book if it ever happens.
Right?
Legion of Subs, Polar Boy, Infectious Lass.
Yep.
All of them, yeah.
Stone Boy.
Oh my God, my dad will love that. When he listens to this, he's going to lose his mind, yeah.
On that, I tried to work in the Inferior 5 in Bizarro.
That's right. Yeah.
That's amazing.
That would be awesome. They would fit so well in there.
I mean, that's a deep, deep cut. But like, yeah, I wanted it to be the second generation, the next generation of Inferior 5.
Oh,
Because they're millennials, call themselves the Superior 5.
oh yeah! Fuck, that's amazing. Oh my god, I love that.
I do love that.
Oh, that's really good. All right,
Isn't it a shame that there's so many ideas and so like little like paper to print on?
We're luckily in the age of content, so I feel like if there's ever a time when we're gonna get these crazy ideas out there, I think it's now, right?
Holy cow!
Right?
Oh, so many ones. All right, let's go to the next question, which comes from Veronique, Français, who asks, you talk about Batman Noel before Christmas. What makes it a good version of the Christmas Carol? Obviously, the famous Dickens.
Yeah, so this is kind of like the opposite thing. Instead of adapting a comic book out, this is an adaptation of a different story in comic book form.
How often has that even been done? I don't know. Like, I know of this, but I don't know any other.
Like taking a piece of literature and fitting it in. I don't know offhand. Batman Noel is the one that really stands out for me because it's so well done. Lee Bermeo and with Batman as Scrooge and everything like that.
But is it a 1-for-1 like Christmas Carol? Because it's very fast and loose with the Christmas Carol-y things, I think.
It's closer than you think it is.
Yeah.
You know, like Catwoman is the ghost of Christmas past.
Was this a story that you enjoyed, Heath?
Yeah, I now that you've mentioned it, I kind of remember this. It's not the super clearest in my brain, but I think I would say I haven't read it since it literally came out. Yeah. But I do kind of remember that, and it made me think like there has to be other versions of things that we've
like classic literature that we could be pulling from. Yeah.
I'm sure there is.
You would think so. I mean, it seems like it's a trope that television animated series do all the time. You would think that comic books would do it more, but I don't know. I'm surprised that this actually hasn't been an animated series.
Like a film, yeah.
Yeah, because I would feel like this would be primed for that.
It'd be a good Christmas story.
Exactly, and Christmas does well for any movie.
Do you know what I want? Yeah. I want a story about someone who doesn't marry for love when they should have. It could be like an Anna Karenina, but it's Donna Troy and Terry Long.
Oh yeah,
that's I think that's the one.
I want to see them do Batman Noel as a Rankin Bass stop motion claymation version.
Shit.
Right, like do it like the old like the Rudolph and stuff like that.
Yes.
Oh my god, that would be so amazing.
Oh my god. This really is the episode of amazing ideas.
Right? I feel like DC execs, we know you're listening, obviously. This is the episode to really pull from.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
But pay Heath to make sure that these all happen.
Yeah, I mean, to answer the question, though, I think the thing that works well about that Batman Noel one is that it takes, like, who are the major beats, who are the major characters, and what are the major relationships, and it actually casts them very well. You know, like Jacob, instead of Jacob Marley, the dead partner, it's Jason Todd is the dead partner, right? Mm-hmm. Catwoman is the Ghost of Christmas Past. It's like the fun of being Batman and the romance. The Superman is the Ghost of Christmas Present. Like, these are the good things happening right now. And then the Joker, of course, is the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. He's this sort of like, you know, the path you're on only leads to death kind of guy. You know, having Gordon kind of take the place of the nephew where, you know, behind Batman's back, he's like, you know, like, I love Batman, but that guy's got issues. You know, like it's a very well cast sort of.
And it's well adapted where you kind of know who the characters are supposed to be, but without actually changing the sort of who the characters are at their core.
Yeah.
Jim Gordon's not acting like Jacob Marley, but you can understand that that's,
like the nephew.
Yeah, the nephew, sorry. But you know that that's who that's supposed to be.
Yeah, totally.
I think that they do a great job of that.
I don't know if there are any sort of other kind of big literary kind of classic adaptations like that. I sure hope there are.
Yeah, and if not, Heath, get cracking.
Yeah, right.
We're just being proponents for giving you more paid work now. I think. Yeah.
Listen, I would love more proponents. I would welcome it.
Absolutely.
Try to make the Brothers Karamazov fit into DC.
That's amazing. All right, well, let's head on over to Reddit, where everybody's happy and no one's ever mean.
Yep, it's a positive place.
Yep, super positive place. And the last question for today, and very, very excited about this one, comes from Jolly Bolly 65. Just really keeping the integrity of this podcast up. They ask, what do you think of taking non-serial properties and expanding them? So they're talking about like the Amazon's Lord of the Rings show or HBO's Watchmen.
Right. So taking things that have like an actual like start, middle, and end, like those stories were done.
Yeah.
As opposed to some of the serialized storytelling of comic books.
Or like Lord of the Rings is in 3 books and they're taking it and talking about expanding that into an entire TV series.
And I think the idea with both of these shows, though, is that they're not just doing the story. They're doing something new in those worlds. Like, what's your thoughts on that, Heath? Is that a job that, like, if it came across your desk, would you be like, that might be too daunting? Or is that something you'd leap at? Is that exciting, that prospect?
No, I think that's super exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I love that idea, as long as you're connected to the world and you can find the emotional core of the characters and what you're dealing with. Like, I love it when you realize, like, oh, they're doing the King Killer Chronicles as a series, or they're doing Lee Bardugo's Six of Crows as a series. Like, I think that's, as long as it's a really robust, fun world, and you can check some of those expectations at the door that we talked about before, with the knowledge that, like, look, in this new Watchmen, we're probably not getting Night Owl. We're probably not getting, some of the stuff that we know from the other stuff.
Yeah, I think
we're probably going to name check some of this stuff, and the world is going to be the same. So that's a really interesting proposition to me, both as a writer and as a fan.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing that really sticks out in my head that I know about that HBO Watchmen thing is they cast Jeremy Irons as like old Ozymandias.
That's right.
That were like well past the events of the original Watchmen. But yeah, I mean, like, I'm kind of interested in that, but I think to me too, I've got the context of like, I'm in a different medium seeing a sequel to Watchmen, right? In Doomsday Clock. Which has interested me. That's obviously not what they're going to do in this show, but like, it's something they're already expanding, the mime and marionette and like these kind of other characters are creeping in there, and I am kind of interested in that.
Well, we've seen some success with them taking comic books and like small series and expanding them. Like if you look at Happy from Grant Morrison,
sure.
I mean, that's a 4-book series that they took and made an entire TV series from.
Sure.
And I think they've had some success with that. Is there any comic series that you would like to see, like some mini series that you would love to see as adapted into a full TV series?
Yeah. I'm super excited for Umbrella Academy.
Yeah. We just watched the trailer for that. It looks great.
Yeah, it does.
It looks really cool. And look, there's some big differences. We don't have number 1 in the ape suit, but it still captures the core of that character, and it looks really neat. Like, I'm super excited for that. Like, I think I mentioned the King Killer Chronicles, which is the Patrick Rothfuss books. I mentioned the Lee Bardugo books, which I'm a big fan of. In terms of comics, what would I love to see? I'm kind of interested to see what they do with Doom Patrol. I'm interested to see what they're doing with Stargirl.
Yeah, definitely that one, yeah.
What other corners of the world would I want, like, desperately? I think why Legion of Superheroes is not like a CW show yet.
Oh, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got all of that.
Without a doubt, yeah, I totally could see. Oh, it would make such a good CW show.
It's my father's greatest lament in life. There's no like Legion of Superheroes series so that everyone can get as into it as he is.
What about you, Doc? Is there any series that you would love to see adapted into like a long form TV
or adapted or like expanded?
Yeah.
I mean, you know that I love Lord of the Rings, and there's so much to work.
Well,
with
we're getting that.
But oh god, I don't. That's
is there
tough.
any like Aquaman like storylines that you would love to see more expanded?
I'm still like pretty smiling and satisfied from the movie, but I think maybe I'd be interested in something like, again, like Elseworldsy, like those other multiverse worlds. Like I always loved Red Sun, and even though the book kind of ties a nice little bow sort of
That's such an interesting universe, though, right?
I'm interested in that world, right? Or taking
Superman shows up and he's not in Kansas. I mean,
because the key thing in Red Son is that Superman is not raised evil.
No,
that's the big thing. He's raised just with a different set of values, and yes, like morally gray. You know, there's some lobotomies and things like that, but he's also doing things to save people, right? To protect people. He's not a tyrant for the sake of tyranny. He becomes a tyrant because that's how he was raised. He's raised to think that, you know, when you're met with resistance, but you know you're right, this is what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something interesting about a world like that and exploring that kind of morality. I'd be into that.
Yeah.
On the note of things growing beyond their source material, though, like I think the best example is Game of Thrones, right? Because like the series has come out faster than the books.
Yeah.
So it had to do its own thing. And George R.R. Martin was even saying like, yeah, the books probably won't match if he ever finishes them. Like, you know, like that. But that's a very like contemporary example where we've all just gotten okay with it. Because it's like, well, like we can't wait 3 years for the next book to then get the season. Like, just do something, and we'll go with it. Like,
exactly, right? And he's not like he's not having input on it. So
exactly.
It's fine. Yeah. But I love talking about all of these. We're talking about what DC's already done, what they're about to do when it comes to adaptations and things like that. But DC's already got. I mean, with Aquaman, and then we're getting Shazam. Heath, have you been enjoying what DC has been doing most recently within the cinematic universe?
Within the, I think Aquaman, I think Wonder Woman was the first one of the movies that I full on enjoyed. That I walked out going like, that was great, and it was inspiring, and it felt so much like the version of the character I wanted in my heart. And I loved it. And then I thought this Aquaman, I love Momoa as Aquaman just because he's got a sense of humor. He feels like an adventurer. He feels like a brawler. Like I love this version of the character. So I'm really excited to see where they're going from this point on. Look, a James Gunn Suicide Squad.
Oh, right? Yeah. You might actually like Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
that's going to be batshit crazy. Like I'm excited about that stuff. So I think now that we're, you know, I like Zack Snyder as a filmmaker a lot, and I know he worked really hard on these films. I feel like trying to fit everything into his style didn't really work for every single character. So, so now that we're getting different storytellers telling different versions of the characters, it feels a little more appropriate. It feels really fun. Like, how do you make a Shazam movie that's not sort of fun?
Yeah,
you know?
Totally.
It reminds me of the comics. Like you're getting these different adaptations, but it feels like these characters, but like in really unique ways.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so that's really fun, and I'm excited to see what's on the plan for moving forward. You know, it would be great to get Ben Schwartz as an awesome plastic man.
That'd be so insane.
And just do a flat out comedy.
Yeah.
I think DC's finally in a place where they understand that they don't need to compete with Marvel. They can do their own thing. They can have stories that are dark. They can have stories that are light, like Aquaman and Shazam, and they're not tied to one thing. But just make good stories in individual movies, and they don't need to worry about what the other guy is doing. And I think we're heading into a new generation of DC that really just takes what DC's already done so well in the comic books, which is just take really good stories and let them live on their own, and we'll figure out continuity later.
Well, the comic books, and I would add, and the television shows.
Yes.
The Berlanti-verse has been fantastic.
Loving this.
Those characters have been great. They give us team-ups. They give us crossovers. They put in fun characters. Like, what a great thing that he's done with these characters.
And they don't shy away from
the intricacies of like comic book
crazy concepts like Speed Force or the Monitor or like things like that. Like they don't back away from any of those things either. Yeah, you're right. Those TV shows have really kind of gone whole hog into the comics. Yeah.
And even that we get something completely off the chain like Gotham, which is like just a mad, insane fever dream of what a TV show
definitely.
But even that like has some real fun and some real juicy high camp elements of it that it just feels like anything can happen,
and extremely well cast. that
Yeah.
show is.
If nothing else, you could say that show is well cast.
Like,
I would
holy
say.
cow! Like that, yeah. Robin Lord Taylor's Penguin is. I didn't think anyone would dethrone Danny DeVito for me, but yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
That's amazing. Well, heading into this, so I didn't warn you about this next section.
Oh, God.
So, and you do not have to participate at all, but this is the thing that we do every week. We call it, this is called Dial Doc, which is basically, I mean, Doctor, do you want to explain this?
Yeah, we do this segment that's based on Dial H for Hero, where we try to come up with. Each week we try to come up with
On the spot.
who would we dial up if we had the H dialer.
So we're just a random hero that we can come up with on the spot who someone would be able to get for whatever the amount of time is that the Dial H is usually. I think it's like 24 hours or
Like
something.
an hour or
and maybe
something
an
like
hour. Yeah, I don't know. It's less than that. Doctor, do you have one? Because I already do. So.
I do have one.
Okay, let's hear what yours is.
So mine is called Crime Apple.
Crime Apple.
So-
Okay.
So Crime Apple, he doesn't have a danger sense like Spider-Man.
Okay.
He has a sense when someone is literally breaking a law of the land. Like,
Okay.
so wherever he is, he just has like an intuitive knowledge of the laws. And if someone is breaking a law near him, then he develops this like hard shell and is covered in like spikes, and then he can go stop the crime. So he's like a pineapple that stops crime.
Oh my god.
So that's Crime Apple.
Wait, did you see the ceramic pineapple I had in the house?
Maybe.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I've got one.
So what's yours?
So I just thought of it because I see this is unfair because I knew that the segment was coming, so I just thought of it a few minutes ago. But my character's name is Kara Van.
Okay.
And she's from a planet where the entire society of the planet travels inside of one person. So they all form into one person.
Okay, yeah.
But if ever in a position where they have to fight somebody, they can separate, and then it becomes multiple people against whatever that.
So it's like a multiple man thing, but it's not like duplicates of one
No,
person.
it's like this entire society inside of that. So depending on the situation, they can pull whoever's necessary for whatever the deed is.
Right, because they might have tradespeople or people with specific skills. Or...
Exactly. It's yeah, exactly. So it's
That's good.
this entire
is good.
That's
society.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, mine is going to be called
yes.
Catter Day.
Ooh.
When you get bitten by Streaky the super cat, you immediately mutate into like a bizarre cat humanoid and get like weird super cat powers. But only from sunrise to sundown on Saturday, and you have to spend half of it napping in the sunbeam in order to recharge.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
That's awesome. You've nailed this game.
Yeah, you won. I don't think we have to do it ever again.
And that came from having just gotten a chance to spoiler alert, write Streaky the Super Cat in my latest backup story of Adam Ant.
Oh!
I'm writing the Adam Ant backups in the Apocalypse Scooby-Doo.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
So go check those out. They're basically Adam Ant trying to get into the Justice League. And so they're 5 pages, and he teams up with the most random people who are giving him the trials to see if he gets into the Justice League.
I mean, I've got to say, and I'm trying not to have my own little like fanboy moment here, but I love this sensibility of taking things that are either sort of silly or obscure or even forgotten, and you clearly have that sensibility, but like, you know, Grant Morrison has that sensibility, Jeff Johns to an extent has that sensibility, like taking things, giving them new life, having fun with it. I love that so much. I really hope to see even more of these insane ideas actually come out and happen.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, you just mentioned that one thing, but is there anything else that you would like to promote, or where can people find you online?
You could find me on Twitter at my name, which is at Heath Corson. I'm also on Instagram at H Corson. That is mostly pictures of my dog and my cat. More likely, you're going to get more of the kind of stuff that you want to find on my Twitter. And that's the best place to find me and where I can talk about stuff. I've got a bunch of things in the pipeline right now, including some new comic book stuff and hopefully some new DC work I can talk about.
But most importantly, Streaky the Cat.
and the Streaky the Cat story comes out. She's one part of the story, and it comes out, I believe, in the new. It's number 2034.
Wow.
Of Apocalypse Scooby-Doo Apocalypse.
Oh my God,
amazing.
I love that Scooby-Doo Apocalypse is also a title that comes out. But.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Like, by the way, let's talk about the fact that I get to work with J.M. DeMatteis,
right,
who writes the Scooby Apocalypse, who's like, since I've pitched Justice League International all the time, to get to meet him and talk to him, I was like, you are one of my idols. And then when he contacted me and said, do you want to do these backups? I was like, oh my God. Like, I mean, it was a dream come true.
I mean, but before we let you go, I have to ask what's the approach to, like mitigating some of that excitement, right? Like how do you keep professional when the people that like have kind of maybe shaped the things that you love are at the next desk over? Like,
you know what? I will say, to a certain extent, I have an inability to play it cool. I kind of say like, hey, you're really an important creator to me, and here's why, and here's my experience, and I can pinpoint some stuff. When I met JM. I emailed him because I wanted to see if I could get the rights to Justice League, or have him like loop in, because he was writing some other animation stuff. I think he was writing Constantine at the time,
right?
And he was definitely writing for Justice League Action. And so I said like, hey, can I get his email just to basically write him a fan letter and tell him like, I'm a huge fan of you and your work, and like Kraven the Last Hunt is one of my favorite books, and all the stuff he's done, Moonshadow, and I wrote him and I was just like, I'm a big fan. I'm the guy who's been trying to get this JLI thing off the ground, and he wrote me back and was just like, let's have a phone call, and we talked, and now we're actually friends, and we talk about problems we're having, or challenges with characters, or how to mine stuff. But I have an inability to sort of say, like, play it cool. Oh yeah, look, it's Scott Snyder. That's not a big deal. Like, I full on geeked out on Scott.
Sure.
I was just like, dude, you're amazing. I'm a big fan. Here's why I like what you do. And everybody loves to hear that. I mean, especially from a colleague, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I guess it's a. Yeah, in my head, I would always think that I'd be an inconvenience to someone. But yeah, no, you're
yeah. Well, not yet, or they don't tell me if it is.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, reach out to Heath online. We definitely would. I know that he would love to hear what you guys thoughts on, especially this episode, and some of his thoughts on what he said here. I know that we definitely want to hear from you, so just reach out to us online through our various social media platforms, such as our Facebook,
Dr. DC Podcast,
our Twitter,
at Dr. DC,
our Instagram,
Dr. DC Podcast.
We've got an email,
drdcpodcast@gmail.com.
and we got that fancy subreddit that you can play on,
r/Dr_DC.
and then we also have our website,
drdcpodcast.com or .ca.
And don't forget, you can call us on the phone. We get voice messages on our doc phone, which is 208-917-DCEU, 208-917-3238. And that's it for this week. Thank you so much, Heath. We really, really appreciate that. It was so much fun.
You guys, this was great. Thank you so much for including me. This was really fun.
Yeah, you are welcome
this
anytime.
Yeah,
absolutely. If you have anything to promote ever, you can always come on this podcast. We really appreciated it. Thank you so much.
I love this plan.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for this week. We'll be back same doc time, same doc channel. Ciao, everybody.
Adios.
Say goodbye, Heath.
Bye, Heath.
All right. Thanks so much, Heath. We'll talk to you later.
You guys, thank you so much. This was really a lot of fun. And when I have something else to promote, I will definitely reach out.
Please, thank you so much.
Super appreciate it. This was a great time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm flattered that you had me be a part of it.
Of course, anytime. All right.
Have a good night.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Heroes, they always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure, they are men of might.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.